I'm Keith Hilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with another instrument review for you. And today I've got another one of the somewhat elusive Greenhoe trombones, specifically one of their new small bore tenors, the GC2. Now, I've done a couple of previous videos talking about the GC2s, whether it was at Midwest Clinic 2021 or the GC2-Y that we've gotten in the shop. But today I've got the GC2-N, their nickel bell version of the GC2. I've talked about my experience with the GC2-Y, all of the great stuff that was going on with it, and of course all the great development work they did with the great Alex Isles and other players with this, but I haven't really been able to spend a lot of time with the nickel bell version. So I'm really excited to share this with you, talk about it, but of course I'm going to let you hear it in action first. So I'm going to be playing all of this today on the GC2-N on my trusty Box 7C, and I'm going to be using their GC2 number 2 lead pipe, the shorter of the two, and we'll talk about that experience as well. We have certainly talked about the development in the history of Greenhoe trombones many times in the past, and so I certainly don't need to rehash all of that, but I think it is good to review where the GC2, their small bore tenor, came from. This is an idea that's gone back quite a ways in the Greenhoe history. My understanding is that even, Gary Greenhoe had been thinking about this before his eventual retirement, and so when Greenhoe with Schilke decided to go back and look at redeveloping the small bore tenor, tenor, they of course talked to Gary. They talked to other folks like the great Alex Isles, the fantastic LA, trombone guru, to figure out, okay, where do we want to do with the small bore? And really where everything kind of came together was using the classic Kahn small bore tenors of the 40s, 50s, 60s, in particular like the 4H, 6H as the inspiration. I've always thought that those classic Kahn small bores had a very different sound, presence, response from its counterpart, the most well-known counterpart, the King, right? For me, Kings have always got a clarity. There's a sparkle. You could maybe say a brilliance to it. There's a flexibility, but the Kahns have always had a warmth to them, right? There's a different weight to the sound that I think is really attractive as well. And frankly, in so much of the development we've seen out there in small bore tenors, it's been, I think, frankly, a little more King focused. So Greenhoe coming back and looking at those classic Kahns as an inspiration, I think is really, really great. Brings a little bit different table to the market. And of course, I've talked about the GC2-Y before, but putting that nickel silver bell on really changes up the experience here. So just to walk through the specs quick, just like the GC2-Y, this has a 500 bore hand slide, an 8-inch nickel silver bell, unsoldered rim, standard kind of dual radius, yellow brass tuning slide. One of the things that makes this different from the GC2-Y is the hand slide composition. And in this case, they're using rose brass outer tubes with a yellow brass crook. So all the way over here, this is a very different playing sonic experience than the GC2-Y. So what is going on with it? I've always felt that denser materials like nickel silver, like sterling silver, like the great Kahn constellations, where they're actually using, brass, copper plated, nickel plated. There's a denseness to the sound that they provide. It gives you not always warmth. I think it definitely does add warmth to the sound there, but not in the gold brass, rose brass, red brass way where the sound spreads sideways more. And the sound doesn't become hollow, but there's kind of this even distribution, and it can sometimes get a little soft on the outside of the sound. With these denser materials, a lot of times what I found is you get more weight to the sound. The sound size doesn't necessarily change as much, but you tend to get more forward projection, and the overall weight, depth of the sound tends to be a little bit more, and you tend to be able to push the sound further. Especially dynamically, you can push things further. It doesn't want to break up nearly as quickly, and it stays a little bit more stable sonically versus other less dense materials that as you push the sound tends to shift in the timbre, going from dark to bright, getting more of that shimmer, that brilliance to it. I think this really encapsulated. For me, compared to the GC2-Y, this is a much darker playing instrument. And again, not in a super broad sound, but just in the overall overtone distribution. The overall response of it, and whether it's the nickel bell, I think the hand slide, the rose brass tubes are certainly playing a role in it as well. This almost gives me a little bit more of that fluffy warmth of the classic Kahn 6H, but without being fluffy, right? But I'm getting a lot of that character in with it. The other side of that coin is that I do feel like it responds a little bit differently. Just like sterling silver, just like some of these other materials, I do think that the response is just a little bit, I would even want to say slower. I'd say, again, just a little bit heavier. I feel like I have to put a little bit more energy into the response. The upper register for me, I felt like I had to work just a little bit differently for. It certainly sang up there, and I certainly didn't have any problem getting, the 12th partial to lock in very, very nicely. But again, I felt like it took a little bit different effort to it. And I felt like for me, especially in, more technical playing, I had to approach it a little bit differently. But again, that's my approach. I tend to play on kind of mid-range gear, not too light, not too heavy. For players who have a, little bit bigger, especially a little bit more energetic airstream, for players who I think either want to have this really, really dark warmth, again, especially on the ballad, boy, I felt like I was just able to sink in the sound. And without me having to change anything, here with my air approach, it was able to give me a lot of this husky warmth that I was really thinking about in the sound. But at the same time, if you're looking for an instrument where if you're doing, some more, high-end, very energetic playing, whether it's salsa work, whether it's like a, horn section work, that kind of stuff. Again, there's going to be a lot of benefit to the stability that this gives you at those kind of dynamics. You can push the sound, you're going to be able to keep that sound going. And overall, I think the overall projection of this, it is different. It's putting the sound out further. So even if you're doing outdoor playing, don't like to play with mics as much, this is just going to do a great job of putting the sound out there all as well. And again, I just love the idea that we've got a US maker who's doing stuff with nickel silver bells. We obviously have a number of makers who offer sterling silver. The nickel silver is a little bit different. The only other major maker I'm aware of who's doing a lot of work with this is Wrath over in England. So I do like that. Again, they're changing up the concept a little bit here at Greenhoe, and I think doing it really, really well. And again, I think it's a really great counterpart to the yellow brass version. Just two sides of a coin designed for different players, different needs, and I think that's fantastic. So, as always, I appreciate your watching. If you have any thoughts, comments, if you've had a chance to play this or other Greenhoe models, or maybe you'll want to compare it against the classic cons, for example, leave them in the comments. Be a part of our viewership community. If you haven't already done so, think about giving this video a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to our channel. And as always, you can find the Trombone Shop on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you for watching.